It started with laughter. Not mine, not hers, but there's her friends, her family, our guests. It wasn't the kind of laughter that came from a harmless joke or a funny story. No, this was different. This was the laughter of people who shared an inside joke, a knowing chuckle at someone else's expense. And that someone was me. I had been in the kitchen, rinsing off plates, lost in the background noise of the evening. I wasn't really listening, just half aware of the chatter and the occasional burst of laughter. Then I heard her voice, clear and light, cutting through the hum of conversation. Honestly, you guys should have seen his face when he thought he fixed the sink. It was like watching a dog try to figure out a doorknob. And then laughter. Real, unfiltered, genuine laughter. The kind that came from a place of agreement. I froze. I hadn't heard the rest of what she said, but it didn't matter. It was the way she said it, so effortlessly, so naturally, like this was something she did all the time. Like she had been making me the punchline for years. My grip tightened on the edge of the sink. A part of me told me not to overthink it, that maybe I was being too sensitive. But another part of me, the part that had been quietly keeping score, knew better. Because this wasn't the first time. It was just the first time I really heard it. I turned off the faucet, the sound of running water replaced by the distant echo of their laughter, and forced myself to move. I grabbed a dish towel, wiped my hands, and stepped into the living room, wearing the best version of my neutral expression. The one I had perfected over the years. The one that let me swallow down little moments like this without making a scene. Emily was perched on the arm of the couch, wine glass in hand, still smiling as her sister shook her head, wiping away tears of amusement. Her brother-in-law grinned and added something about how it sounded like a real classic Mark moment, and another wave of laughter rolled through the group. I let my eyes skim over the faces in the room, people I had known for years, people who had been there when we got engaged, who had danced at our wedding, who had once been friends. Or at least, I thought they were. Now, they just looked like an audience. Emily's gaze met mine, just for a second, and I saw it, the flicker of hesitation, the brief moment where she registered that I had heard her. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced with the same easy amusement she always wore around them. She turned back to her sister and kept talking. Just like that, I was dismissed. Something in my chest tightened. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that it was just a joke. But it wasn't, because I could still hear the way they had laughed. The way it had felt too easy, too practiced. How long had this been going on? How many times had I been turned into a joke the moment I left the room? I walked over to the side table and grabbed my drink, taking a slow sip while my mind raced. I tried to focus on anything else, to let the night play out like it was supposed to. These get-togethers had become a routine, something Emily loved, hosting, entertaining, playing the role of the effortless, charismatic wife with the perfect home and the perfect life. I was part of that image, whether I wanted to be or not. But standing there, surrounded by the warm glow of the candles she had picked out, the throw pillows arranged just so on the couch, the carefully curated playlist humming in the background, all I could think about was how I suddenly felt like a guest in my own home. The conversation moved on without me. Someone made a joke about work, another story was told, another round of laughter filled the room. I could have joined in. I could have pretended I hadn't heard anything, played along like I always did. Instead, I set my drink down, murmured something about needing air, and stepped outside. The night air was cool against my skin as I leaned against the railing of the porch, my hands still damp from where the condensation had clung to my glass. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment. It was just a joke. But why did it feel like more than that? Because deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't just about the sink. It wasn't about a single offhand remark. It was about all the moments before this one. The ones I had brushed off, ignored, convinced myself weren't worth making a fuss over. Like the time we were out to dinner with her friends, and she had laughed when I struggled to pronounce something on the menu, nudging her friend and saying, "Mark's adorable, isn't he? He tries so hard." Or the time we were at a wedding, and she had told a table full of people how I had gotten lost on our road trip last summer, how she had to take over the driving because I couldn't handle directions if his life depended on it. Or the way she sometimes sighed when I got something wrong, small things, meaningless things, like forgetting which brand of coffee she liked or picking the wrong detergent, and how that sigh always came with a shake of her head, like she was tired of explaining. Alone on the porch, with nothing but the sound of distant traffic and the occasional burst of laughter from inside, I felt it. The slow, creeping realization. I had spent years convincing myself it didn't matter. That if I just tried harder, if I just loved her more, she would see me the way I saw her. But maybe she never had. Maybe she never would. I stayed outside longer than I should have, long enough for the voices inside to fade into background noise. When I finally stepped back in, Emily was in the middle of another story, her hands moving animatedly as she spoke. She barely glanced at me as I returned to my spot. And just like that, the night continued. But something had changed. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to forget this. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over in my head. The way she laughed. The way they all laughed. It should have been something I could shake off, something I could chalk up to just another harmless joke. But I couldn't. Not this time. I turned my head to look at her. Emily was already asleep, her body curled away from me, her breathing slow and even. She looked peaceful, like someone who didn't have a single worry in the world. And why would she? She didn't have to lie there wondering if the person she trusted most had been chipping away at him for years, little by little, in ways so small they had almost gone unnoticed. Almost. I shifted onto my side, my fingers curling around the edge of the blanket. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was being too sensitive. It wasn't like she had called me worthless. She hadn't yelled at me or insulted me outright. It was just a joke. But then I thought about all the times before. All the little moments I had brushed aside. The way she had sighed in exasperation when I forgot to pick up something from the store. The way she had rolled her eyes when I mispronounced a word in front of her family. The way she had muttered, of course, under her breath when I made a mistake assembling the bookshelf last year. None of those things had seemed big at the time. Just small cuts. Tiny, insignificant things. But small cuts, over time, still leave scars. I exhaled slowly, forcing my eyes shut, willing myself to sleep. I had work in the morning. I couldn't afford to lose sleep over this. But my mind wouldn't let it go. The next morning, Emily acted like nothing had happened. She hummed to herself as she moved around the kitchen, pouring coffee into her favorite mug, the one I had bought her for our anniversary last year. It had some quote on it about love and laughter, something that had felt sweet at the time. Now it just felt ironic. "Sleep okay?" she asked, looking up from her phone. I hesitated for half a second before forcing a nod. "Yeah." She smiled, then went back to scrolling. I watched her for a moment, wondering if I should say something. Ask her why she had laughed at me the way she did, why she had made me the joke in front of people who were supposed to be my friends, too. But the words wouldn't come. Because I already knew the answer, didn't I? She didn't think she had done anything wrong. So I let it go. At least on the surface. I went to work, I answered emails, I sat through meetings. But the feeling stayed with me, creeping into the edges of my thoughts like an unwelcome guest. By the time I got home that evening, I had convinced myself I was going to let it go. I wasn't going to let one night ruin my mood, wasn't going to start a fight over something so small. Then Emily made another comment. I was standing at the sink, washing up the dishes from dinner, when she walked up behind me and laughed softly. "You're so serious when you do that," she said, resting her chin on my shoulder. "It's just dishes, Mark. Not brain surgery." I didn't respond. I didn't even look at her. She pulled back, probably expecting me to laugh with her, to roll my eyes and move on. But I just kept scrubbing the plate in my hands, watching as the soap slid down the sink, disappearing into the drain. She sighed. "Oh, come on. You're not still upset about last night, are you?" My fingers tightened around the plate. There it was. Still upset. Like it was nothing. Like I was the one making a big deal out of something silly. I set the plate down carefully, then turned off the water. I grabbed a towel, dried my hands, and turned to face her. I just don't get it, I said finally. She raised an eyebrow. Get what? I searched her face, looking for something, anything, that would tell me she understood. That she knew what I was talking about. But there was nothing. Just mild curiosity, like she had already forgotten. Why you talk about me like that, I said. Like I'm some idiot you have to put up with. Her expression shifted, just for a second, before she forced out a laugh. Mark, it was a joke. Was it? She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. You're seriously mad about that? It was just some harmless teasing. Everyone jokes about their spouses. I felt my jaw tighten. Yeah? Do they? She let out an exasperated sigh. Yes, they do. My friends joke about their husbands all the time. It's normal. Normal. That word stuck in my head, bouncing around like a pinball. So that's how you see me? I asked. As someone to joke about? As someone you have to laugh at too, what? Fit in. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Mark, you're being dramatic. Dramatic. I let out a slow breath, nodding to myself. Right. She threw up her hands. I don't get what you want me to say. I wasn't trying to hurt your feelings, okay? I didn't think it was a big deal. That's the problem, I said quietly. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if she wasn't sure what to say to that. Then she shook her head. I don't have time for this, she muttered, grabbing her phone off the counter. I have work to do. And just like that, the conversation was over. I stood there for a long time after she left the room, staring down at the sink, my hands gripping the counter. She didn't get it. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't care. I wasn't sure which one was worse. For the next few days, I tried to act normal. I went through the motions: work, chores, dinner. I even laughed at the right times when Emily told a story, nodding along as if nothing had changed. But inside, something had. Because once you start seeing the cracks, you can't unsee them. And suddenly, they were everywhere.